Welcome back. Today we're solving the mystery of Archie's empty notebook. Let's uncover the secrets, one clue at a time, with a cozy cup of coffee in hand. The sound of the clock ticking echoed through the dimly lit office, each second stretching longer than the last. Nero Wolfe, the towering figure of intellect and mystery, sat unmoving in his chair, eyes locked on the unassuming leather-bound notebook before him. It had arrived with no name, no explanation, and yet it demanded his attention. Something about it felt wrong, unnaturally quiet, as if hiding a truth far more dangerous than its empty pages suggested. Outside, the city rumbled, oblivious to the game being played within these walls. But Wolfe knew. The moment he opened this notebook, everything would change, and whatever was waiting on the other side of its silence would test his skills like never before. Chapter 1. The Empty Notebook. It was a quiet afternoon in Nero Wolfe's brownstone, a place where peace reigned and the world's troubles were kept at bay, except when clients entered with problems. Wolfe, however, was not concerned with the usual chaos of New York. He was preoccupied with something else. A thick, leather-bound notebook that had arrived earlier that day, delivered in an unusual fashion. There was no letter, no sender's name, just the notebook, wrapped in plain brown paper. Wolfe, who had been sitting comfortably in his favorite chair, his vast girth occupying most of the space, lifted the notebook to his nose, sniffed it, and then placed it on the coffee table before him. Archie Goodwin, his ever-observant and quick-witted assistant, leaned against the door frame of the study, observing Wolfe's every move with curiosity. "Another mysterious package, eh, boss?" Archie quipped, leaning in the doorway, hands in his pockets. Wolfe gave a slow, measured look, his gaze already heavy with thought. "Indeed. This particular notebook is intriguing, Archie. It arrived without a word of explanation, and its very existence demands my attention." Archie took a few steps forward. Glancing at the notebook, his curiosity piqued. "So, what do we do? Open it?" Wolfe's response was nonchalant yet purposeful as he cracked open the notebook, revealing perfectly blank pages. Not a single word was written. It looked innocent enough except for the fact that it had been placed on Wolfe's desk for a reason. Archie raised an eyebrow, glancing at Wolfe, who was now inspecting the notebook with more scrutiny. "Well, looks like someone's playing a joke on you." "Blank pages?" "Not a joke, Archie," Wolfe replied, his voice laced with the faintest touch of irritation. "This is a challenge, and I do not appreciate being challenged without knowing the rules." Wolfe flipped through the pages slowly, as if expecting something to reveal itself. "Someone has sent us this for a reason. They want us to use it to uncover something. Or they want us to waste our time," Archie offered. "There is no such thing as wasting time, Archie, when it comes to the art of deduction. This blank notebook has a purpose, and it is up to me to uncover it." With that, Wolfe's immense frame shifted slightly as he reached for a piece of paper and a pencil. He placed the notebook before him and began scribbling on the paper, as if his mind were in overdrive. Archie watched, intrigued but also amused. "Let me guess, boss. You're gonna sit there all day and pretend to crack the code. Meanwhile, I'm gonna grab a drink. It's been a slow day and I need something stronger than coffee." "You will remain here, Archie," Wolfe said with quiet authority. "I believe the answer to this puzzle will not reveal itself quickly, but with patience." For the next several minutes, Wolfe remained silent, scribblings, calculations and theories in the margins of the paper. Archie, who had initially stepped back to find something to do, paused and returned to the room, unable to resist the mystery that was unfolding. What do you think? Archie asked, leaning over Wolf's shoulder. I'm close, Archie, very close, Wolf replied, tapping his pencil against the notebook. This is no ordinary notebook. Whoever sent it wanted me to know something they are trying to hide. And hiding something, Archie, is always the first mistake. Archie watched in silence as Wolf's fingers moved across the pages of the notebook, each action deliberate, methodical. After a few more moments, Wolf stopped, his face suddenly registering the faintest flicker of realization. There, he said, pointing at a particular spot on the page. It's not about the notebook itself, but rather the act of opening it. It's a clue in itself. Wolf closed the notebook gently, his gaze thoughtful. This notebook was not meant to be read, but to be revealed. It is a key to something hidden, and that, mon ami, is what we must uncover. Archie stood back, processing the information. So, someone sent this to us to unlock something else? Exactly, Wolf said, his eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. The notebook is empty for a reason. It is meant to lead us to something far more important, something the sender wants to remain concealed. And we will find it. With that, Wolf stood up, pushing the notebook aside and turning to his desk. He summoned his assistant, who by now had taken a few steps backward, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. You are right, Archie, Wolf said, his voice growing more resolute. It's a challenge. But let it be known, I do not lose at challenges. Sure thing, boss, Archie said, winking, and I'll be right here when the mystery's solved. In the meantime, I'll keep a bottle of something handy. Could be a long night. As Wolf began organizing his notes, the mystery of the empty notebook loomed large. He knew the game had started, and he would find the hidden truth behind the cryptic message that had been placed in his hands. There was no other option but to succeed. Chapter 2. The First Clue. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the brownstone, casting a warm glow across the room where Nero Wolfe sat. He was, as usual, nestled comfortably in his favorite chair, a massive antique leather armchair that seemed to swallow him whole. His eyes, sharp and focused, were directed at the empty notebook resting on the coffee table before him, its blank pages taunting him with their silence. Archie Goodwin, his ever-faithful assistant, leaned against the door frame, observing the scene with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. It had been hours since they had discovered the notebook, and although Wolfe had spent most of that time contemplating its mysteries, nothing of substance had emerged. Wolfe, for all his brilliance, had not yet cracked the case, but Archie knew better than to interrupt the process. Wolfe's mind was like a fine-tuned machine. It simply required time to work through the gears. So, what's the verdict, boss? Archie asked, his tone casual but laced with the faintest hint of impatience. You gonna sit there all day staring at a blank book, or are we gonna get some action? Wolfe didn't even glance at Archie. His eyes remained fixed on the notebook, his fingers steepled together in front of his lips as if deep in thought. Patience, Archie, he replied, his voice as calm as ever. The solution is here, hiding in plain sight. One does not rush genius. Archie rolled his eyes but said nothing more. Instead, he wandered over to the window and glanced outside at the bustling street. The world continued on, oblivious to the mystery unfolding in the brownstone. It was a typical day in New York, a day that, to most, was unremarkable. But for Archie and Wolfe, it was a day filled with intrigue. After a long, pregnant silence, Wolfe finally spoke. I was correct, he said, his voice steady, as though he had been pondering the mystery for days, not just hours. The notebook is empty, yes, but not truly. There is something within it. We simply need to see it. See it? Archie repeated, his eyebrows raising. You're not talking about some kind of mind trick, are you? I thought we were supposed to be solving crimes, not reading tea leaves. Wolfe's lips curled into a faint smile, his eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of someone on the verge of a breakthrough. No, Archie. Not tea leaves. There is an imprint on the pages. Something subtle but definite. Archie stood up straighter, intrigued. Imprint? What do you mean? With a slow, deliberate motion, Wolfe reached for the pencil on his desk. He began to lightly shade the surface of the notebook's pages, the thin graphite streaking across the pristine white paper. As the pencil moved over the surface, faint, almost invisible symbols began to emerge. At first, they were just faint smudges, but as Wolfe continued shading, the markings grew clearer. Letters, numbers, and strange symbols appeared on the page, as if they had been etched there, invisible to the naked eye. The imprint was a code, and it was starting to take shape. Ah, Wolfe murmured, his voice tinged with satisfaction. There it is. A message, encoded for someone with the patience to see it. Archie leaned in, studying the marks on the page. A code? Now we're talking. He peered closer, his eyes squinting as he tried to make sense of the strange symbols. What does it say? Wolfe's fingers lightly traced the symbols as he read them aloud, each word a puzzle waiting to be solved. It reads, Meet me at the corner of Hudson and West when the clock strikes midnight. You are not the only one searching for the truth. Archie blinked. Well, that's a bit ominous. What do you think? A meeting with the mysterious sender? Should we go play detective in the dark of night? Wolfe's eyes were already calculating, piecing together the possibilities. It's clear the person behind this notebook has been watching us, monitoring our every move. They want me to solve their puzzle, and they expect me to meet them. But why? What do they know that we don't? Archie, sensing the gravity of the situation, turned to Wolfe with a serious expression. So what now? We just show up? Do you have a plan, or is it just you and me against the city at midnight? Wolfe stood up slowly, his massive frame dwarfing the room. We go, yes, but carefully. I will not be led like a puppet on strings. Whoever this is, they want something from me. I intend to find out what. Poirot's usual methodical approach would have been to gather as many facts as possible first. But with Wolfe, it was always a bit different. He preferred to confront the situation head-on, his intellect and resolve being his most powerful tools. He looked at Archie, his eyes sharp. Be prepared for anything, Archie. This person is not playing a game. They want something, and I intend to make sure they give it to us. Archie nodded, eager for action but sensing the gravity of the moment. Understood, I'll be ready. But I don't like this. It feels off. I'm not fond of it either, Wolfe admitted, his voice low. But one thing is certain. There is a reason we were chosen for this, and by tomorrow I intend to know exactly why. The clock ticked on, and the plan was set in motion. At midnight, Wolfe and Archie would confront the mysterious sender of the notebook, and though Wolfe had his suspicions, he knew that the truth would only be revealed when they stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever awaited them. Chapter 3. The Midnight Meeting. The evening air had turned crisp as darkness settled over New York City. The streets, usually bustling with life, were quieter now. The only sounds the distant hum of car engines and the occasional hiss of a passing bus. In the heart of the city, at the corner of Hudson and West, two men stood at the crossroads of mystery, waiting for the clock to strike midnight. Nero Wolfe, as always, was dressed in his customary suit, a dark, tailored ensemble that gave him an air of authority even in the stillness of the night. He stood tall and confident, his hands resting comfortably behind his back, his gaze directed at the street in front of him. His mind was already working, analyzing every possible outcome of this strange meeting. Whoever had sent him the empty notebook was no fool. They knew exactly how to catch his attention, and Wolfe was determined not to be outwitted. Archie Goodwin, ever the loyal assistant, stood a few paces behind Wolfe, his usual nonchalant posture replaced by one of alertness. He kept his hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning the surroundings with practiced ease. Though Wolfe rarely allowed him to engage in anything remotely resembling physical danger, Archie was no stranger to trouble. He had seen enough to know when something didn't sit right. And tonight, he could feel the tension in the air. "Not exactly the usual night out for us, is it?" Archie muttered, his voice low as he glanced at Wolfe. Wolfe, without turning, responded, his tone matter of fact. "No, Archie, it is not. But there is something quite compelling about this situation. Whoever sent that notebook wants something from us. And I intend to find out what." "Yeah, well, let's hope it's not a trick," Archie replied, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. "I don't like the idea of getting lured into something this easily." Wolfe didn't answer immediately, his attention focused on the empty street ahead. His sharp eyes picked up on every detail. The streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement, the occasional car passing by, the distant chatter of a late-night pedestrian. But there was nothing, no sign of anyone meeting them at the designated spot. It was as if the whole city were holding its breath. The clock tower in the distance chimed the hour, its deep bell tolling through the night air. The sound seemed to echo down the empty street, marking the moment. Wolfe's expression did not change, but there was a slight tension in his posture now. He knew that time was not to be wasted, and then, as if on cue, a figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the street. The person was cloaked, the hood pulled low to hide their face. They moved with a sense of purpose, crossing the street toward Wolfe and Archie with measured steps, as if they were fully aware of the significance of this moment. "Well, here we are," Archie muttered under his breath. "Let's see what they've got in store for us." Wolfe's sharp eyes never left the approaching figure. The person was walking with a deliberate pace, and despite the cloak, there was an unmistakable confidence in their movement. As they drew closer, Wolfe made no move to greet them. Instead, he stood silently, his gaze focused. The figure stopped a few feet away from Wolfe, their face still concealed beneath the shadow of the hood. For a moment, there was silence. The air between them felt thick with anticipation. Finally, the figure spoke, their voice low and steady. "You are Nero Wolfe," the voice said, not a question but a statement of fact. "Indeed I am," Wolfe replied, his voice calm and measured. "And you, I assume, are the one who sent me the empty notebook." The figure nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. "I did. And I trust you understand the significance of it now." Wolfe's eyes remained focused on the figure. "I do. It is the key to something far more important than a simple puzzle. You wanted me to come here, and now I am. But I still do not understand why you would involve me in this matter. What is it that you want?" The figure remained silent for a long moment, their eyes glinting in the low light. Then, finally, they spoke again. "I want you to stop what's coming," they said, their voice heavy with a sense of urgency. "The people I work for are dangerous. They have plans, and they will stop at nothing to see them through. You and I both know that. But you also know that I have given you the chance to stop it before it's too late. Wolfe's mind raced as he processed the words. The notebook, the cryptic clues, the hidden agenda. All of it pointed towards something larger, something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. The figure was offering him a chance to stop whatever it was that was coming. But the question remained, what exactly was coming? Who are you working for? Wolfe asked, his voice steady, his curiosity piqued. The figure hesitated, then lowered their hood slightly, revealing a face that Wolfe recognized, barely. It was a man, but one who appeared familiar, as if seen only in passing years ago. The man's features were sharp, his face drawn in with tension, but it was the glint in his eyes that caught Wolfe's attention. I am no one you know well, Wolfe, the man said, his voice now tinged with regret. But the people I work for are powerful. They've already set things in motion, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop them, except you. Wolfe stood silently for a moment, his mind working at full capacity. What is it that you're asking of me? The man stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Find out who's behind it. Find out who's pulling the strings, and stop them before they succeed. I've already provided you with the first clue, the notebook, but you'll need to dig deeper to find the truth. Wolfe's gaze narrowed. And why should I believe you? The man looked down, his face shadowed with a mixture of guilt and fear. Because I know that if you don't, everyone will pay the price. And when it's all over, there will be no one left to stop them. Not even you. With that, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. The sound of his footsteps faded into the night. For a long moment, Wolfe and Archie stood in the middle of the empty street, the chill of the night air seeping into their bones. Wolfe's mind was already processing the information he had just received. This was bigger than anything he had encountered in a long time. The mystery was unfolding, but it was clear that the pieces of the puzzle were still scattered. Archie finally broke the silence, his voice filled with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. So, we're supposed to stop some faceless group, huh? Sounds like the kind of mess we usually get into. But I'm guessing you've already got an idea of who's behind all this, right? Wolfe turned to Archie, his face impassive but his eyes burning with resolve. Indeed, Archie. But the identity of those behind this scheme is not yet clear. There are too many questions and not enough answers. But one thing is certain, whoever they are, they will not succeed. Not while I am still breathing. Archie gave a small, knowing smile. Well, I'm with you, boss. Let's crack this wide open. As they walked back toward the brownstone, the mystery only deepened. Wolfe knew that this case would take them down a path filled with danger and deception. But for him, there was no turning back now. The game had begun, and he would solve it, one piece at a time. Chapter 4. The Hidden Enemy. The city of New York was never quiet, and tonight was no exception. As the night deepened, the usual buzz of traffic and the murmur of people walking the streets continued. But within the walls of Nero Wolfe's brownstone, a stillness had fallen. The sound of the clock ticking in Wolfe's study seemed louder than ever, and Archie Goodwin's restless pacing echoed through the otherwise quiet house. Wolfe sat, as always, in his chair, his broad figure a silhouette, against the warm glow of the desk lamp. He had been thinking for hours, piecing together the scraps of information they had gathered so far. The empty notebook, the cryptic message from the cloaked figure, and now this new piece of the puzzle, the mysterious threat. "Boss, are we really just gonna sit here?" Archie asked, his voice tinged with impatience, as he paused in his pacing to look at Wolfe. The guy shows up, says he's working for a dangerous group, and just disappears into the night. Seems like we're getting nowhere. Wolfe didn't immediately respond, his eyes fixed on a stack of papers before him. His mind was working at full capacity, reviewing every detail of the case. He could sense that the clues were hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered, but the puzzle was more intricate than he had expected. "Patience, Archie," Wolfe said finally, his voice calm, yet carrying the weight of his intellect. "You know well enough that answers do not always come in the way we expect them. We have been given a single clue, the notebook, the coordinates, and the promise of something far larger than what it appears. Now we must wait, and we must be observant. The truth will reveal itself." Archie sighed, throwing himself into a nearby chair with a resigned groan. "Right, I'll just sit here, quiet as a mouse, waiting for the big clue to pop up." Wolfe ignored Archie's banter and instead focused his attention on the notebook again, carefully flipping through its pages. He had already examined it several times, but each time, a new detail seemed to emerge. An indentation here, a faint smudge there. These were the marks left behind by the hidden message. Wolfe's mind ran over the possibilities, connecting dots in ways others might overlook. After a long pause, Wolfe's eyes narrowed as he stopped at a particular page. His fingers ran lightly over the lines of the notebook, finding a small, almost imperceptible ink stain in one corner. It was faint, but it was enough to trigger a memory. "Archie," Wolfe said, his voice suddenly sharper, "get me the newspaper from the day the notebook arrived." Archie raised an eyebrow but didn't question the order. He knew when Wolfe was onto something important. "Sure thing, boss." Moments later, Archie returned with the paper. Wolfe scanned it quickly, his eyes darting across the headlines. Then his gaze froze on a small article tucked away in the corner, almost overlooked. It was a brief mention of an incident, a robbery, or rather, a heist, at a high-security vault in Manhattan. The timing of the robbery was interesting as it coincided perfectly with the day the notebook had arrived. "Interesting," Wolfe muttered to himself. The robbery was only a diversion. The real target was far more valuable than the contents of that vault. Archie, who had been leaning over Wolfe's shoulder, peered at the article. "What do you mean? A diversion? For what?" Wolfe looked up at him, his expression as intense as ever. "The notebook, Archie. Someone is orchestrating this entire situation to distract us. They want us focused on the wrong thing, the heist, the robbery. But the true crime is something far more dangerous." Archie sat up straighter. "So, you think the robbery was a setup? A smokescreen?" "Precisely," Wolfe said. "Whoever sent the notebook, whoever is behind this plot, used the robbery as a way to shift our attention. It's a classic misdirection. And now, I believe we are meant to look at the robbery and miss the true nature of the crime. We must go deeper." Wolfe leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping together in thought. "The heist itself may have been meaningless, but it leads us to a deeper connection, an organization with the power to manipulate not only the police, but our very investigation." "And the notebook?" Archie asked, still processing. "How does it fit in?" "It is a key," Wolfe explained, his voice measured. "The code in the notebook, the symbols, and the message are all part of a carefully laid plan. They want us to find the connection. They want us to follow the trail. But it will not be as simple as we expect. The real question is, what is the true purpose of the notebook? Just then, the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the quiet house, cutting through the tension in the room. Wolfe remained unmoving, but Archie immediately stood, a glint of curiosity in his eyes. "Expecting someone, boss?" Archie asked, already moving toward the door. Wolfe didn't answer immediately. He simply sat there, staring at the notebook, his mind still whirring with possibilities. "Open the door, Archie. But be cautious." Archie opened the door to find a delivery man standing on the doorstep, holding a small brown package. Without saying a word, the man handed it over, and Archie took it, eyeing the delivery with suspicion. "Another mystery package, eh?" Archie asked as he closed the door behind him, carrying the package to Wolfe. Wolfe's eyes flicked over to the package, a glimmer of recognition in his gaze. He had expected this. The pieces were falling into place. "Open it," Wolfe said, his tone quiet but commanding. Archie tore the package open, revealing another notebook. This one smaller but identical in appearance to the first. Wolfe examined it carefully, his brow furrowing as he flipped through the pages. It was, once again, completely blank. But when Wolfe reached the last page, he found a note written in a familiar hand. "I will see you soon. You won't be able to avoid the truth forever." The words were a clear message. The game was far from over. "This is the second notebook," Wolfe said, his voice low. "And this time, the message is clearer. We are being watched, and whoever is behind this is not finished yet." Archie leaned against the wall, his gaze steady on Wolfe. "You think they'll show up again?" Wolfe gave a slow, deliberate nod. "They must. But we must be ready. The next move is ours." Chapter 5. The web tightens. The days that followed the arrival of the second notebook were filled with tension. Nero Wolfe, as always, remained calm and focused in his study, meticulously reviewing every detail of the case, while Archie Goodwin, ever the restless one, seemed to be bouncing off the walls with questions, theories, and impatience. The second notebook had added another layer of complexity to an already intricate puzzle. Wolfe's mind churned over the hidden messages in both notebooks, the cryptic clues, and the warning scrawled on the final page of the most recent one. "I will see you soon. You won't be able to avoid the truth forever." It was clear now that the person behind these notebooks was not only aware of Wolfe's methods, but was actively challenging him. The cryptic message, however, was not just a taunt. It was a call to action. Wolfe understood that the clock was ticking, but the question remained: what was the sender trying to hide? And more importantly, why had they chosen Wolfe to uncover the truth? The second notebook had arrived in a similar fashion to the first, delivered with no return address and no explanation. Wolfe had inspected it closely, and despite its seeming emptiness, he was certain that it held a clue. The very nature of the challenge was personal. It was meant for him. Wolfe had spent hours in his study, paging through the book, looking for any sign of writing or hidden messages. And as expected, hidden in the back cover in the most delicate script were numbers, an address, a date, and a time. The address, 47th Street and 7th Avenue. The time, 9 p.m. The date had already passed, yesterday. Wolfe had immediately deduced that someone was moving quickly, and the urgency of the situation could not be ignored. Archie's restlessness. As always, Archie was the first to notice Wolfe's changing demeanor. His assistant had been pacing for hours, waiting for any indication that their next step would present itself. But it wasn't until Wolfe's muttered command to prepare to leave that Archie knew things were moving forward. "Where are we headed, boss?" Archie asked, adjusting his coat as he followed Wolfe to the front door of the brownstone. To 47th Street and 7th Avenue, Wolfe replied, his voice steady but filled with an underlying sense of urgency. Someone is expecting us, and I have the feeling they won't wait for us to arrive. Archie paused at the door. You think it's a trap? Wolfe's sharp gaze met Archie's. I do not believe in traps, Archie. Not for me. Not for us. We'll proceed with caution, but we'll move forward. I am confident the answer lies ahead. A dangerous encounter. The streets of New York were alive with their usual evening rush. Taxis honking, people walking in and out of restaurants, the sounds of the city filling the night air. Wolfe, with his hands behind his back, moved through the crowd with surprising ease despite his bulk. Archie, ever alert, stayed close behind, scanning the crowd for any signs of danger. The two of them arrived at the address on 47th Street, a modest building nestled between two high-rise apartments. The sign out front said it was a small, unassuming office for a law firm, but Wolfe's instincts told him there was more beneath the surface. They approached the door cautiously, and Wolfe reached for the handle. Before he could turn it, the door swung open from the inside, revealing a man standing there, his face obscured by the shadow of the entryway. The man said nothing, just motioned for Wolfe and Archie to enter. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with little furniture save for a large table in the center. At the far end of the room stood a desk, and behind it sat a woman, an older woman with sharp features and cold eyes. Her gaze fixed on Wolfe and Archie the moment they entered. Wolfe, the woman said, her voice smooth, calculated, and far too calm for someone who had just met one of the most formidable detectives in the city. I see you've come. Wolfe stood silently, studying her. His mind was already calculating, already assessing the situation. You are? Wolfe asked, his tone cool but probing. I am the one who has been leading you on this path, the woman replied, her eyes glinting with something dangerous. You may call me Mrs. Devereaux. Mrs. Devereaux, Wolfe repeated, his expression unchanged. And you are behind these notebooks, these clues? The woman's lips curled into a thin smile. Yes, I am. But it's not the notebooks you should be focused on, Nero Wolfe. It's the truth. The truth that you are so desperately trying to uncover. At that moment, Archie, who had been standing quietly near the door, spoke up. And what is the truth, Mrs. Devereaux? The one you're so eager to keep hidden? She laughed softly, the sound cold and knowing. Oh, Archie. The truth is always the hardest to swallow. The truth is that what you've been chasing isn't just a game. It's a war, and if you don't act fast, you'll lose everything. The trap is set. The atmosphere in the room shifted as Mrs. Devereaux's words sank in. Wolfe, who had remained calm up to this point, now stiffened slightly. He knew that she wasn't just talking about the notebooks. She was speaking about something far bigger. Something that involved more than just a puzzle. You've made one mistake, Mrs. Devereaux, Wolfe said, his voice low and measured. You've underestimated me, and in doing so, you've made a fatal error. Mrs. Devereaux's smile faltered for a moment, just long enough for Wolfe to see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. We shall see, Wolfe. We shall see. Without warning, the door behind them slammed shut, locking with a heavy click. The trap had been sprung. Archie's hand instinctively moved to his pocket where he kept his revolver. But Wolfe stopped him with a raised hand. His calm demeanor never wavered as he turned to face the locked door. Relax, Archie, Wolfe said. This is only the beginning. It seems we have been invited to play a game. and I always play to win. Chapter 6. A Game of Shadows. The air in the small, dimly lit room felt suffocating. Nero Wolfe, his immense figure towering in the middle of the confined space, was unmoving as the locked door behind him clicked shut. His sharp eyes, ever observant, darted to the walls, the corners, the faintest flickers of shadow. Archie, standing just a few steps behind him, tensed, his hand instinctively brushing the revolver tucked in his coat pocket. The air crackled with unspoken tension, but Wolfe remained calm, unfazed by the trap they had seemingly walked into. Mrs. Devereaux stood by the desk, her thin smile still on her lips. The entire scene, from her calculated calm to the sudden sound of the locked door, made it clear that this was no ordinary meeting. This was a carefully orchestrated setup, a game that Wolfe had been drawn into, whether he liked it or not. "You seem unfazed, Wolfe," Mrs. Devereaux said, her voice laced with a quiet, icy amusement. "I had wondered whether you would react differently. Most men, when they find themselves in a locked room, would show at least a flicker of concern. But you're still standing there, as though this were just another case." Wolfe's eyes flickered toward Archie, who remained silent, waiting for his cue. The tension in the room was palpable, but Wolfe's composure was unshaken. "Mrs. Devereaux," he said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had already seen through half of her plan. "You've misunderstood something. This is not a game, at least not to me. I don't play games. And now, you've made the mistake of thinking you can outwit me." The woman's smile faltered for a brief moment, but she recovered quickly, her eyes narrowing. "You're as sharp as they say, Wolfe, but not sharp enough. Not in this case. You see, I control the pieces now." "Not you." Archie's brow furrowed at her words, and Wolfe could feel the shift in the air. The balance of power, which he had controlled in every case before, had now tilted. They were in a different arena now, one where the rules were not his own. But that didn't faze him. He'd faced greater challenges and emerged victorious. "I'm afraid you're mistaken, Ms. Devereaux," Wolfe replied coolly. "You've set this up as if it were a chess game. But what you don't understand is that I don't play by the same rules. You think you've trapped me, but I've already seen the path forward. The question is, are you ready to accept the consequences when your little game turns against you?" For a moment, the woman stood still, eyes searching Wolfe's face as if trying to gauge his resolve. But whatever doubts she may have had quickly vanished, and she took a step closer to Wolfe. "You think you can outsmart me? That's what I like about you, Wolfe. You're always so confident, but you're wrong. You're walking into a trap, and I'm afraid you won't be able to get out of it once it's..." She turned sharply and gestured to the room around them. The walls, once adorned with nothing but simple furniture and bookshelves, now seemed to have hidden corners, dark shadows that pooled like liquid waiting to be stirred. Wolfe's sharp eyes caught the subtle flicker of movement. Something or someone behind the door they had entered. He had no time to analyze it further. His mind had already moved on. "You think you have control of this situation?" Wolfe said, his voice cutting through the tension. "But the truth is, you're the one who's in the dark. You've revealed just enough to give me a glimpse, but you've underestimated my ability to connect the dots." The woman didn't reply immediately, her lips tight as if she were holding back a sharp retort. But then, the silence was broken by a soft, almost imperceptible click, like the sound of a switch being thrown. Wolfe's eyes shot to the source of the noise, and Archie instinctively tensed. "We'll see how long your confidence lasts," Mrs. Devereux said, with a slight smile, stepping back from the desk. Wolfe's mind immediately went into overdrive. The room, which had been relatively simple in its design, now appeared to be a carefully constructed trap. The walls that had once seemed harmless were now closing in on them, and Wolfe could almost hear the calculated manipulation in every second that passed. Suddenly, the floor beneath them creaked, and the walls seemed to shift. Wolfe's keen senses detected something. An angle in the room had shifted. Something had triggered the mechanism. Then, the lights dimmed. Archie immediately moved toward Wolfe, his eyes scanning the darkened room for signs of danger. Before either of them could act, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man dressed in black, his face hidden beneath a dark hood. He was tall, thin, and moved with a cold, purposeful stride. "Who is this?" Archie asked, his hand still hovering near his gun. The man didn't speak, but instead walked straight toward the desk where Mrs. Devereux stood, offering her a brief nod of recognition. She smiled faintly at him, her posture relaxing slightly, as if the presence of the man confirmed her control over the situation. Wolfe didn't flinch, his gaze unwavering. "Ah, so we have reinforcements, do we? But tell me, what are you hoping to achieve with all this?" "I'm not easily intimidated," the man finally spoke, his voice calm but menacing. "You're smarter than I expected, Wolfe. But you've missed the point entirely. It's not about intimidation. It's about power. You think you can solve this? That you can outthink me? We've been watching you, waiting for you to make your move." Wolfe's expression hardened. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said, "and I have no intention of letting you win." Archie looked at Wolfe, sensing the subtle shift in the atmosphere. There was a calculated danger in the air. Now, something far darker than what they had faced before. They had been drawn into a web of shadows, and Wolfe knew that the answers lay hidden beneath layers of deception and manipulation. The man took another step forward, his eyes locking with Wolfe's. "You're already too deep in it, Wolfe. There's no way out now. The truth you're seeking will cost you everything." Wolfe stood tall, his gaze never leaving the man. "I never said I wasn't willing to pay the price." The room was now charged with the weight of what had been said. The walls, once a mere backdrop, now felt like a cage closing in. The power dynamic had shifted, but Wolfe was not one to surrender. If anything, this was where his mind excelled. The thrill of facing an adversary who was as equally cunning, as equally determined, was what made him the detective he was. "Let the game begin," Wolfe said, with a quiet, steely resolve. Chapter 7. A Web of Deceit. The heavy silence that had descended upon the small locked room was broken only by the steady breathing of the three men. Wolfe, Archie, and the shadowy figure who had emerged from the darkness. Mrs. Devereux stood by the desk, her lips curved in a faint smile, as if satisfied with the game they were playing. The tension in the room, thick enough to cut through with a knife, felt suffocating. Wolfe's mind was already working at full speed, his sharp intellect analyzing every detail of their predicament. Archie stood a few paces away from Wolfe, his posture alert and ready for action. His hand remained near the revolver, tucked into his coat, his every muscle coiled in anticipation. He had seen enough dangerous situations to know when something was about to turn ugly, and it felt like that moment had arrived. Wolfe, however, was unfazed. He was a man who rarely showed fear, even in the most perilous of situations. He faced Mrs. Devereux and her associate with the calm assurance that only he could muster. His mind was already calculating the next move. "So," Wolfe said, his voice cutting through the tension, "we've reached a crossroads, haven't we? You've set the stage, Mrs. Devereaux, and your associate seems eager to play the role of enforcer. But what exactly is it that you want from me?" Mrs. Devereaux's smile didn't falter, but there was a glint of something dangerous in her eyes. She had been in control up until now, but Wolfe's refusal to cower before her was beginning to irritate her. "You still don't understand, do you, Wolfe?" she said, her voice soft, almost condescending. "It's not about what I want. It's about what you're gonna do next. You've already come this far, but there's only so much longer you can dance around the truth." Wolfe's gaze never wavered. "The truth? And what truth is that, exactly? That you're behind all of this? Whatever this all is?" "Ah, you're getting closer, Wolfe," she replied with a nod, her lips curling into something that almost resembled admiration. "But you still haven't grasped the full picture. You see, it's not just about the notebooks, the robbery, or the shadows in the dark. It's about power, control. And in the end, it's about who gets to dictate the course of events." Archie raised an eyebrow. "So, this is all some power play, huh? You're not just solving crimes, boss. Looks like we're mixed up in something much bigger than that." Wolfe remained still, his eyes fixed on Mrs. Devereaux. "You have been playing your cards carefully, I'll give you that. But I'm not interested in your games, Mrs. Devereaux. What I am interested in is the truth behind your scheme, and I will find it. Sooner or later, I always do." Mrs. Devereaux took a step forward, her posture straightening as her gaze hardened. "You're not in control here, Wolfe. You've made a mistake by coming to this meeting. The moment you set foot into this room, you became part of the plan." Wolfe's lips twitched into a slight smile. "Perhaps. But I prefer to think of it as my plan, Mrs. Devereaux. I have made a habit of turning things around." Just as the words left his mouth, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. It was a familiar sound, but it was not the approach of a visitor. They were the steps of someone who had just entered the brownstone. Archie's eyes flickered toward the door, his hand instinctively resting on his gun. "That's strange," Archie muttered, his tone low. "I didn't hear anyone at the door. Who else is here?" Wolfe raised a hand to signal for silence. His eyes darted toward the closed door, his mind already calculating the possibilities. Before anyone could react, the door to the room swung open, revealing a man, a tall, thin figure wearing a well-tailored suit, his face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. "Mr. Wolfe," the man said, his voice smooth and confident, "I believe we have some unfinished business." Wolfe's face remained impassive, but there was a spark of recognition in his eyes. The man standing before them was someone he had encountered before, though the details were hazy. He had been a part of something darker in the past, a figure who operated from the shadows, pulling strings from behind the scenes. Mrs. Devereaux turned to face the newcomer with a look of surprise, but her expression quickly shifted to one of wary respect. "I didn't expect you so soon," she said, her voice betraying a hint of tension. The man, unfazed by the words, stepped into the room with a smooth, deliberate motion, his eyes flicking briefly toward Wolfe and then to Archie. "I thought we were done with the games," the man said, his voice carrying an edge of annoyance. "But clearly I was mistaken." Wolfe's mind was racing, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. This man was the key. He was the one who had been pulling the strings all along, the one who had orchestrated the situation to lead Wolfe here. "You..." Wolfe said, his voice cutting through the tension. You are the one behind all of this. The notebooks, the robbery, everything. And you've been watching me from the beginning, haven't you? The man smiled, a slow, calculating grin. It wasn't just about watching you, Mr. Wolfe. It was about making sure you found it. The moment you took the bait, we knew you would be able to solve the puzzle. But you didn't realize you were playing into our hands. Wolfe's expression didn't change. I don't believe in coincidences. Everything you've done, every step you've taken has been calculated. And now, I believe you finally made a mistake. The man's smile faltered, and for the first time, Wolfe saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. You think you're in control, but you're not, Wolfe continued, his voice steady. You've been using the notebooks to guide me, to mislead me, but now I see the real game. The robbery, the hidden messages, it was all meant to keep me on the wrong trail. You wanted me to follow the wrong leads to waste my time, but you've underestimated me. The truth is right in front of us. Mrs. Devereaux's eyes narrowed, and she took a step back. The man, still smiling, seemed to recognize Wolfe's resolve. You're smarter than I expected. But it's too late. The plan is already in motion. You're too far behind. Wolfe shook his head. The only thing in motion here is your downfall. I've solved the puzzle, and now I'm going to expose you. Before anyone could react, Archie's sharp voice broke through. We've got company. It seems like we're not the only ones with the plans. Wolfe's eyes flicked toward Archie, and then back to the man before him. The room had become a battleground, one where every word, every action carried weight. The game had reached its final phase, and Wolfe was ready to finish it. Chapter 8. The Final Gambit. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch longer as the tension reached its peak. Nero Wolfe stood poised, his large frame unmoving, but his mind sharp and calculating, dissecting the words of the mysterious man who had now revealed himself as the orchestrator of the entire scheme. His partner in crime, Mrs. Devereaux, stood off to the side, her face carefully masked. But Wolfe knew better than to trust appearances. The truth was beginning to unravel, and Wolfe was ready to make his move. Archie Goodwin, ever the watchful assistant, stood alert by the door, his hand still hovering near his sidearm, though he knew Wolfe would prefer to handle things with intellect rather than force. The new arrival, the tall man with a dark hat, had revealed his role in orchestrating the entire mystery. Wolfe had suspected him from the beginning, but now the pieces were finally falling into place. You've underestimated me, Wolfe said, his voice calm but unwavering as he met the man's calculating stare. I knew there was something more, something you were trying to hide. You thought you could play me, but it's you who's been caught in the trap. The man's eyes darkened slightly, and for the first time, Wolfe saw a hint of emotion slip past the facade of confidence. It was brief, but telling. You're wrong, Wolfe, the man replied coolly, adjusting his stance as though preparing for something. The game is far from over. You've solved the puzzles, you've figured out the clues, but you've missed the most important one. And now, it's too late to stop what's already in motion. Wolfe leaned forward, his sharp eyes narrowing. I think you've misunderstood, my friend. It's never too late. Your plan has crumbled before your eyes, and I will see to it that you pay the price for your scheming. The man seemed unfazed by Wolfe's words, his face expressionless. The truth doesn't always win, Wolfe. Sometimes the one who controls the story is the one who survives. Wolfe's lips twitched into a slight smile. That is where you're wrong. I control the story now. You've played your cards, and now it's time for me to reveal the truth behind the facade. The woman, Mrs. Devereaux, stepped forward, her face tense as she looked at the man, then back at Wolfe. You think this is about you, Wolfe? You think you've been the one in control this whole time? This wasn't just about you finding clues. It was about watching how you would react, how you would solve the game. And now, the real test begins. Wolfe raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. And what, pray tell, is the real test? She smirked, her eyes gleaming. You'll see soon enough. The man beside her spoke again, his voice suddenly full of an unsettling calm. You may have figured out the riddle of the notebooks. You may have solved the mystery of the robbery, but that was never the point. The point was always this. The people you've been trying to protect, the people you've been trying to save, are already lost. The game is bigger than you realize. And no one, not you, not me, not anyone, can change what's already been set in motion. Wolfe's face remained stoic, but his mind raced. There was something wrong here, something deeper than he had originally understood. The robbery, the notebooks, the cryptic clues. These were all distractions, designed to keep him off balance, to make him focus on the wrong elements. What was truly at stake had nothing to do with these trivial matters. The true conspiracy was far more dangerous, and the real criminals were still out of his reach. Wolfe looked toward Archie, who was watching the exchange closely, but said nothing. Wolfe didn't need to say anything. He knew that Archie understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just another case. It was a matter of life and death. I see now, Wolfe said slowly, his voice low but firm. You're not after me. You never were. This was always about something larger, something far more dangerous. But you've made a fatal mistake. The man's expression tightened, and for the first time, he seemed to lose his cool. What mistake? Wolfe stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. You've revealed your hand. And now I know who's really behind all of this. The man's eyes flickered, but before he could respond, Wolfe turned toward the corner of the room, where the faintest flicker of movement had caught his eye. He'd noticed it earlier, but had chosen not to acknowledge it until now. As he walked toward the corner, his mind piecing together the final clues, he saw it, hidden behind a stack of files, tucked out of sight. An envelope. Wolfe took the envelope carefully in his hands and opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, covered with a detailed map of the city, with several marked locations, each one connected by a web of red lines. The locations, Wolfe knew immediately, were connected to the mysterious group that had orchestrated the entire game. The final clue was in his hands. Everything has been leading me here, Wolfe said quietly, almost to himself. The robbery, the notebooks, the cryptic messages, they were all distractions. But you've made one final mistake. You've underestimated my ability to see the bigger picture. The man took a step back, his face now pale with a mix of fear and frustration. You don't understand. You can't stop this. It's too late. You've lost. Wolfe looked back at him, his eyes sharp. No, my friend. You've lost. Turning to Archie, Wolfe handed him the map. Get this to the authorities, Archie. Now, we don't have much time. Archie nodded, his usual easygoing manner replaced by a rare seriousness. He moved quickly to the door, ready to carry out Wolfe's orders without a word. Meanwhile, Wolfe faced Mrs. Devereaux, who stood still, her face a mask of defiance. You've lost too, Wolfe said, his voice cold and final. The game ends here. A tense silence followed, thick with the weight of what had just transpired. The man and Mrs. Devereaux exchanged a quick look. Then, without another word, the man turned and exited the room. Mrs. Devereaux remained, standing with a mixture of anger and resignation, but her face betrayed something deeper, fear. "You didn't win, Wolfe," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "You've just delayed the inevitable." Wolfe took a step closer to her, his voice calm, but with an unmistakable edge. "Perhaps. But I've bought time, and in my experience, time is often the greatest weapon." With that, he turned and followed Archie out of the room, leaving Mrs. Devereaux to contemplate the consequences of her actions.